My name is Abhay, and I share conversations with talented and interesting individuals linked to the global Indian and South Asian community. It's informal and informative, adding insights to our evolving cultural expressions, where each person can proudly say, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." Hi everyone. On this episode, we share a conversation with doubles tennis champion Rajeev Ram. Stay tuned. So the other day I went for a run with a work buddy. I actually was kind of dreading it because as soon as I took a few strides, I realized how badly out of shape I'd become. But I also knew that just by staying consistent, on pace, and mindful of speed and stamina, that I'd be able to finish a 5K run that day. And once I did, I actually felt great. It was a small thrill, sure, but an affirmation of what I could still accomplish. And speaking of small thrills and affirmations, thank you so much for listening to this and for sharing it with your friends and family, for rating, downloading, and subscribing wherever you get your podcasts, and for following us on the socials at Dr. Abhay. Now, normally, while the explosive starburst of talent and achievement is a very celebrated and popular highlight, finishing that run made me appreciate the beauty and joy of a more sustained, blossoming accomplishment that generates energy, wisdom, and momentum as part of a long tail of achievement. And in some ways, it's an apt model to describe professional tennis player Rajeev Ram. Rajeev is a native of Colorado who grew up in Indiana playing tennis with his dad as a kid. He was a junior tour and college tennis star, winning an Indiana State Singles Championship and helping to win an NCAA College Tennis Championship at Illinois. Rajeev turned pro in 2004, and for the next 13 years, journeyed through the professional tour with the highlights of winning 2 singles titles, getting to a Grand Slam doubles final, and earning a silver medal in the Olympics. He retired from singles play in 2017 to focus on doubles and team tennis. Since then, Rajeev has been a 5-time Grand Slam champion, winning mixed doubles twice and men's doubles once at the Australian Open, and winning the last 2 US Open men's doubles championships with his partner, British tennis pro Joe Salisbury. He's been active with the US Davis Cup team this fall, and after nearly 2 decades since turning pro, this past October, Rajeev was the #1 ranked doubles tennis player in the world. We caught up recently to chat and share a conversation about his journey, about preparation and practice, and about reflections on his achievements. But I started with a much more important thought question to ask him. I have to ask you, do you ever dream about tennis and wake up sort of going, "Oh my God, what just happened?"
Wow, that's a good question. Yeah, I actually do. Funnily enough, you would think after all these years of playing so much and all that, maybe I would try and shy away from it
Like
when I
suppress
sleep.
all
But
of that,
no,
right?
yeah, but no, it doesn't happen. I still do dream about it, which I guess is a good thing because it means that I'm still as interested maybe as ever. But
Yeah.
I do still dream about it. Absolutely.
I'm curious. I mean, so like when you actually are either falling asleep or waking up, or those kind of quiet moments where you're like, "Oh, this is exactly what I should be doing with my volley," or do you ever get those sort of moments of clairvoyance where you're like, "Oh my gosh, I just unlocked the secret to what I've been doing wrong"?
I definitely know what you're talking about. It probably doesn't happen as much anymore. I feel like it's more just like, for me, anytime it's just the thought of hitting a ball, thought of running, thought of moving, thought of playing. But it's not like any of those situations where it's like, oh, that one thing is gonna, like that one swing thought. And maybe that's good because I feel like sometimes those things are fleeting because it works for 5 days and then it doesn't work anymore.
Right,
So
right.
hopefully it's a little bit more ingrained than that. But it honestly for me it's just more the idea of playing or the feeling of it.
Yeah.
That's the thing that gets me going.
Does the feeling of it, is that something that in some ways takes time to develop? I mean, especially for younger players who go through a lot of the at least initial training with coaches and academies and that kind of thing. Does it take time and sort of patience to really get to that point where you're just going on instinct and the feel of things?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've heard a lot of these things about like 10,000 hours and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I feel like I think that there's an innate feeling that you have one in this case when you're hitting a tennis ball that is pretty special. But I think in order to kind of make that repetitive and to be there all the time, it does take time. It does take practice. It does take it sounds maybe cliche, but it is just that repetition that you keep going over and over and over again that makes it ingrained to the point where it's just always there, or it's there most of the time.
Do you feel sort of either, and I've heard different answers to this kind of thought or question, but do you ever feel in some ways incomplete or sort of naked without the tennis racket nearby? I mean, like, do you have a tennis racket in your car at all times?
Yeah, I do, but not for that reason.
Okay.
Yeah, I do have a tennis racket in the car all the time, just because if there's ever a situation where I need it for whatever reason, it's there. It's an old racket, but is not something that I use normally. But no, I used to actually feel more that way. I used to feel more like not having a racket around made me feel like I was incomplete. But now I feel like as I've gotten older, maybe it's just a maturation. Maybe it's just realizing there's more to life than just tennis. That I don't feel like I have no problem putting my rackets in the other room, and not looking at them for a couple of weeks. Like, I got no problem with that. So it's almost a helpful thing for me to push them away a little bit, because then when I do get back to playing, I have a bit of excitement and a bit of enthusiasm and all that. So it's not like it's got to be there all the time.
Is that time period sort of away from the racket and away from the court? Is that sort of restorative? Is it sort of like charging your battery a little bit?
Yeah, completely. I mean, a lot of the things that I focus on nowadays are more of that, making sure my energy is good, making sure when I do compete, I have a full tank of gas, and I'm not trying to, play on fumes or anything like that. And I think those breaks are very, very important, both mentally and physically.
For someone who's been playing for, now a long time, 30 plus years, are there any quirks or superstitions or rituals from when you first picked up a racket that you still kind of rely on, that still are part of your process?
As I've gotten older, I've tried to rely less on rituals and things, because, especially superstitions, because I just feel like ultimately it doesn't, really have the effect on, outcomes and how you play and all that. But I feel like there's a definite importance to having things that you can control that you do. So I think for me, it's more just like going back to the basics of what tennis is for me. For me, I'm quite good with my eyes. I have a good eye for the game and an eye for the ball. So, like, if I'm struggling at all, really focusing on watching the ball is an important thing for me. I mean, it sounds so, basic and whatever, but genuinely that's something that I think about all the time on the court is, okay, I got to watch the ball. I got to watch my opponent hit it. I got to watch it cross the net. I got to watch it bounce on my side, and I got to watch me hit it. And, if I really pay attention to that, that's how I usually play my best, or hit the ball the best. So it's not really a superstition or a ritual. It's definitely not a superstition. It's not really a ritual, but it's maybe just a focal point that's been there since I, remember playing tennis.
Right. I mean, it's not like, hey, my signature is to bounce it only 3 times when I'm serving, or like, I tape my racket a certain way, or that kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So things like that, I've kind of shied away from a little bit more. But I've kind of really tried to focus more on these more, I feel like they're more tangible things,
Are there, do you know players who do, I wouldn't say rely on it, but like it's a part of their kind of process that makes the iteration and the practice and the preparation actually just, it's another nuance or quirk to it?
Oh yeah. There's players all over the place that, they'll only shower in the same shower. They'll only, like use the same toilet, or they'll, put their, rackets a certain way in the bag, or, whatever it might be. I mean, there are all of these things that go on, and I'm not saying any of that's wrong. Anything that can kind of get you in a better headspace is good. But I feel like sometimes for me, it just got a little exhausting to always have to do that. And then all of a sudden, you do all those things and it still doesn't work. Then you're like, well, what happened? Now I got to think of a whole new set of,
quirks. You got to go through. I was going to say, there's a reinvention of the ritual itself. So
exactly, yeah.
You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. After a quick break, we'll come back to our conversation with U.S. Open men's doubles champion Rajeev Ram. Stay tuned. Conversation. It's the antidote to apathy and the catalyst for relationships. I'm Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with global Indians and South Asians, so everyone can say, trust me, I know what I'm doing. New episodes weekly, wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Hi, I'm actor Sway Bhatia, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing with Abhay Dandekar.
Welcome back to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Let's rejoin our conversation now with tennis champion Rajeev Ram. You've had so much early success in tennis, and I imagine that was at a time where there really weren't a whole lot of American players of color. And
Yeah.
but you used to play with your dad every day. And what were some of those kind of early lessons and motivations that you sort of took away from those days and those times? What do you remember perhaps, being some of the drivers for you early on when there may or may not have been a whole lot of role models that looked like you or played like you?
So basically, tennis started out for me as a more or less just a father-son activity.
Yeah.
I mean, I was an active kid growing up. I didn't enjoy video games. I didn't enjoy sitting at home or inside. And I wanted to be outside and play sports. And so, whether it was, growing up in America, it was football or baseball or, anything like that. And I happened to just be a little bit better at tennis
Yeah.
than the other ones. It just came more naturally to me. So we lived in an apartment at the time, and my dad would, there was a court in the complex, and my dad would come home from work and he would take me out and we would hit balls. And this started when I was, gosh, 3 years old. I don't actually remember the first time I played tennis. I was so young. So, and it kind of just ended up being our thing. I
Yeah.
loved it. I, I didn't realize it at the time, but now I can appreciate how much effort that took on his part. But we would do it basically every day. And then, that went on until I was about 12 years old. We moved around a little bit, but until I was about 12 years old, it was just me and him that would play.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really like I loved watching. I loved watching players. I loved watching professional tennis on TV. I kind of grew up in the time just about when there was some great American men tennis players on tour. So
Yeah.
I had that to look up to, but it was a weird one to not really have anyone that looked like me in the mix for sure. I will say that.
When did you at some point get that sort of sense that, inherently in yourself, knowing that, like, hey, look, I'm okay. I have some
Yeah.
skill. I'm pretty good. Is it just like when you first start winning, or is there some sense of confidence that develops even before that?
Probably a little bit of both. I mean, like I always, I guess I kind of felt like this isn't that hard, for
Yeah.
me to do. Like I can do this skill or play this game. I can make it. It feels like it feels like it's a lot easier to me than I see what it looks like for other
Yeah.
people. So that's one thing, and then then you start playing. I started playing tournaments a little bit, and I started winning and winning quite easily. And I think I got to be about maybe 13, 14 years old when I started winning a lot locally and even quite a lot nationally. And so I was like one of the better players in the US for my age. And I was like, wow, that's a bit, it's a bit crazy to think about. It
Right.
wasn't really supposed to happen like that.
Yeah.
But then, you start to I started to realize like I was okay, but it never really dawned on me that, oh, this is gonna be my career.
Yeah.
It was just like, oh, I'm okay at this. And my parents were always kind of at the thought process that tennis could lead to more educational opportunities or better educational opportunities, which they were absolutely right.
Yeah.
I was able to kind of have my pick of going to whichever college I wanted to, not because of my academics, but much more because of my athletics, and
Sure.
that was the case for sure. Yeah.
Well, and in that way, with that, like, sort of building at some point, because of, and certainly growing up in the Midwest, I would imagine that the Indian American community probably, lent some part of your cultural identity. Did you ever think of yourself as an Indian American athlete, or rather just I'm an American athlete who happens to be Indian?
Yeah, probably more of the latter.
Yeah.
I'm an American athlete that happens to be Indian until I was a bit older, and then I really, after I kind of got to college and a little bit after, I really sort of gravitated towards what you said before, whereas I'm an Indian American athlete because simply because I couldn't I realized how few of us there are around,
Yeah.
in all these capacities. And I'm basically the only tennis player, and for the fact that Indians or Indian Americans play so much tennis, I'm kind of the only one that really has made let's say a long standing career
Sure.
out of tennis. And so I've kind of taken a lot of pride in the fact that I really hope that I'm not the only one that remains to be that way, because I
Yeah.
feel like there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of potential there for there to be many more people like me. But yeah, as a kid growing up in the Midwest, I saw myself as just an American athlete who happens to be Indian, and then it changed a bit when I got to travel the world a little bit more, and
Yeah.
kind of maybe a little bit, mature a little bit, get in touch with my own culture and heritage a bit more.
Tell me, did you ever, was part of that? So part of that definitely is recognizing that there's perhaps even a little bit of a role for that. There's certainly you're juxtaposing yourself against all the other tennis players who are out there, not just domestically but globally. But then on top of that, do you ever feel like there was sort of a, hey, I'm sort of the other? Was there ever any marginalizing in that way that sort of in some ways kind of forced you to embrace that identity a little bit?
You know what it was really more is that when I started to play on tour as a professional,
Yeah.
and even a little bit in college, like I saw other players from India
Yeah.
actually. And I realized that I have so much in common with these people, because not only do we share the same, I mean, I'm only a first generation, right? My parents
Yeah.
are from India, so it's not like it's that far back at all.
Yeah.
But, I have so much in common with these people because they look like me. They have all of the same cultural backgrounds as me, and not only that, they play tennis, which that was the kicker that I didn't find so much in America, was another Indian person who was as interested in the sport as I was. But now all of a sudden, here they are. So
Yeah.
that sort of was what it was that led me to realize that I was probably a lot more like them than I was like some of the
Yeah.
people that I actually grew up around and with. Not in a bad way, just that's just how it was.
What is that, now that you've sort of not only just embraced that, but there's maybe some responsibility to that. What does that responsibility sort of feel like in 2022 as an Indian American athlete?
It feels like would love to give the next generation sort of the somebody to look up to and someone to look at that I probably didn't ever have. I feel like I know what that would have meant to me at 12 years old or 13 years old
Yeah.
to say, oh, look, there's so and so on the professional tennis tour or the professional golf tour or whatever it is that's just like me, that has all of these same attributes and cultural traits, and now they're playing a sport at a high level and a professional level and being successful. And I know what that would have been like for me. I would have taken a whole lot of stock in that, and I would have taken a whole lot of inspiration from that. And so I feel like that's part of the deal, is that if I can do that to even one,
Yeah.
it's worth it for sure.
I want to ask you and talk about something that's very unique to you. When did you sort of realize that your love and your passion and having a particular skill set for doubles tennis was almost sort of realized?
So you basically start playing tennis to be a singles player and
Yeah.
as a singles player, right? And that was what my career was from when I turned pro until about 2016, 17. And then I got to the point where I remember it very clearly. In 2016, I had a pretty good year in singles and doubles both, and I played I think over 100 matches. And I was also turned 32 that year, and I
Yeah.
was like, okay, I stopped. I remember the last match of the season, and I was like, another one of these years, and that's probably it for me.
Yeah.
Like my body just can't handle it, and I always knew that I never gave doubles a full shot. I wasn't a good enough player like some of these guys are to play singles fully, and then just win doubles grand slams and be top in the world. I
Yeah.
wasn't good enough for that. I needed to work at it a bit more. So I kind of had a decision to make. It was like, okay, another one of these years, and maybe that's it, or do I really give doubles a full shot? So I kind of toyed around with it, but halfway through the next year in 2017, I was like, okay, this is about it. Like I need to make this decision, and I just decided, yeah, pretty quickly that singles was going to be it. No, that was going to be it for my singles, and I was going to focus on doubles and really see how good I could get, because I felt like it was a bit untapped for me.
Do you have to, in some ways, completely reinvent yourself, or is it just a slight sort of steering or tweaking to get away from that? Because I imagine that you have to have a completely different or a separate stream of commitment to trust and synchronized instinct and chemistry when it comes to playing doubles.
Yeah, I don't think it's completely reinventing, because it's not like I didn't play doubles, my whole career. I
Sure.
did play, but it's not like it was totally foreign. But what was foreign is the fact that now tennis became a team sport all of a
Yeah.
sudden. And like I have the responsibility to help another player on my team, because that's going to help me, and also I have the responsibility to let them help me, which is a really weird thing in tennis, because we don't have coaches, we don't have like you're not allowed to do any of that. It's just you are out there completely by yourself in singles, and all of a sudden now I have a partner that, geez, if he plays better, it makes my job easier. And
Right.
and I have somebody that can actually help me, instantaneously if I allow them in. So that was the sort of toughest part, was realizing that this has gone beyond just hitting the ball now, and it's gone to like a team sport experience, which is something I never really did so much as a kid, or definitely not as an adult.
Why is that such the reverse process where, people starting, is it just simply because you have to become a master at the skill itself of singles tennis? Or is it such a, well, we just don't have a real platform for doubles to blossom in a separate lane, perhaps?
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting question. I don't actually know the answer to that. And
Yeah.
I feel like I see it shifting a little bit, in the sense that there's players. It's almost been always before, like, okay, if you're good enough, you'll just play singles, because that's where, more of the recognition is. If you're a professional, more of the money is, more of the accolades, all of that.
Yeah.
But what I see happening now a lot is players that, I don't know if they know they're not good enough. That's a bit harsh, but maybe they think that they don't quite have what it takes in singles, are specializing and thinking about doubles from a very young age, even like pre-professional, even like
Yeah.
junior age
Yeah.
kids. And they're realizing that if they get some of these things right earlier on, they have such a leg up on a lot of the players playing doubles on the professional tour. So I see it shifting a little bit. I don't know if it's going to ever be completely that way, but I
Right.
do see people thinking about being doubles players way earlier than when I was, coming up.
You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. After a quick break, we'll come back to our conversation with US Open men's doubles champion Rajeev Ram. Stay tuned. Every story told is a lesson learned, and every lesson learned is a story waiting to be told. I'm Abhay, and I share conversations with global Indians and South Asians so everyone can say, trust me, I know what I'm doing. New episodes weekly, wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tam France, and you are listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Welcome back to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Let's rejoin our conversation now with tennis champion Rajeev Ram. With that, especially for you, you've had some major tournament success as a winner at the Australian and US Open, and it's all come in your mid 30s. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in a sport that, contrastingly, in the singles world, has so much concentration of talent in players who are so much younger. As you reflect on that a little bit, what have been maybe some of the drivers for your own sense of longevity, for that matter?
I think, first of all, just the way that I was brought up into tennis. It was never somebody pushing me. It was always my choice. So it was always, I've never lost that desire to try and improve and try and be better and try and, what's the next thing I can figure out. So I've never really lost that desire. So I think that's one thing. It's an emotional, mental longevity that sometimes takes more of a toll than the physical one.
Yeah.
Then the physical side of it too, like I said, I kind of realized whenever it got to the point where my body was feeling like it could break down, I really didn't like that feeling. So I pulled away from it and said, what can I do to change this? Do I take a break? I was never afraid of, long breaks or anything like that, if I felt like I needed it. So I feel like, and there's also a bit of luck involved in that too. I've never had, a knock on wood, a serious injury that's required a surgery or a long time out or anything like that. So I think it's a lot of those things. And then the last thing is, I just think I'm a bit of a late bloomer in general. I mean, it takes me a little while to figure it out. I didn't break the top 100 in singles until I was 25, which is pretty late. I didn't, like you said, do all these things in doubles until my, early to mid 30s. And, I've got a strange record. I have played the most Grand Slams of anyone ever to play tennis before winning one.
Wow.
Which it was I won the Australian Open in 2020 on my 58th Grand Slam, which is a record, which I didn't even realize was the case until somebody told me that. But yeah, so like things have always taken me a little bit longer for whatever reason.
As someone who's in some ways this sort of late bloomer, and you've seen success more towards, on the longer side of your journey, do you now, knowing that, does it force you in some ways, or do you rethink how to prepare or practice? Do you prepare or practice differently now than when you were first, a tennis professional?
Very differently. Yeah, it's a lot about preserving, I would say,
Yeah.
more so, and not exerting too much, making sure that I leave every practice wanting to practice more
Yeah.
is sort of the theory that I go by. I don't want to leave the practice court saying, geez, that's everything I got, and I don't want to come back.
Right.
It's okay to leave, a match court doing that, or a tournament, when it's like that was the end of a stretch and now I have a break and I don't want to play tennis for a while, and that's okay. But I try very hard to never leave a practice court that way, and always wanting to practice more, because then it means I'll want to come back the next day or 2 days later or whatever, and it'll still be fresh. So that's sort of a way that I do it. Whereas when I was a kid, it's sort of like you want to maybe push yourself to further limits of that, because you have the energy to be able to do that, but now it's not the case anymore.
I saw that you're on the U.S. Davis Cup team, and you beat your partner Joe Salisbury recently. How'd that go over?
That was one of the more interesting experiences, because look, we played a semi of the U.S. Open on Thursday, final of the U.S. Open on Friday. We both left for Scotland on Saturday. The next day, we were on a plane to Scotland, and our first match is against Great Britain. So now I got to play my partner. It's a live match. That means that there's 2 singles before the doubles. We split the singles, so like it comes down to the doubles. We're playing in Scotland, which for all the tennis fans out there is Andy Murray's home country, hometown, literally. So there's 9,000 people watching this match, and now I'm playing my partner, who I just won the U.S. Open with 3 days before. It was wild, but we put it aside. We actually had a chat about it the day before, saying, look, let's go out there, let's compete as hard as we can. Whatever happens, happens. No. And that's what we did. It ended up being about a 3-hour match that came down to the very end, and my partner and I ended up winning it for our country. And it was a crazy emotional experience, though, I will say.
With Dave, I mean, obviously the sort of very, very sense of import that you have in playing your doubles partner, but when you're playing Davis Cup, and especially as sort of a doubles specialist, if you, is there just a different joy to team tennis than that's just separate from the individual side?
Totally different. Yeah, I mean, I've played on a team 4 times in my tennis career. It was high school, college, and then the Olympics, and now Davis Cup. And so it's like, it's a totally different feeling when you play for something that's bigger than yourself, and more. You play for your teammates. In this case, you play for your country. It's just a lot different pressure. It's one that I really, really enjoy, and I will do my best to never say no to the opportunity to play in that arena, because it's something that it's so unique for me as a tennis player.
I wonder if that same unique joy, or that same sort of spirit that you get from team tennis, I wonder if that lends itself at all to being a better observer of the game. And for that matter, as a kind of student of it, does it lend itself to the experience of coaching at all for you?
Maybe, yeah. And I think when you pay attention that much, so much of tennis, especially at the highest of levels, is about that sort of energy that you can bring to the court, and the mindset that you have. Because I mean, when you're talking about the best players in the world, I mean, everyone hits forehands and backhands just fine.
Right.
It's not really about that. It's about who can sort of get themselves in the right frame of mind to produce what they can in the right moments. And I think in those team atmospheres, you can really affect that, not only on the court for the other players, but off the court. You can provide, hopefully, a good environment to for everyone to feel comfortable and feel happy and feel like they can bring their best to the court. So I think, as a teammate, you can also affect the outcomes of those matches, even without hitting a tennis ball.
So like you said, like at that highest level, the actual twists on the game are probably a little bit more, they're just so nuanced. And when you're actually watching these things in real time, you have a front row seat to all of this. Is it somewhat difficult to not put your own personal experience in there and say, like, well, I've tried that, but it hasn't really worked? How do you sort of, process some of that, especially when the talent level is just that high?
Yeah, I mean, I think each individual is just that we are all so individual, and I think if I just try to put myself in those shoes, and it's like, if someone's out there telling me, that this is how you should do it, I would probably shy away from that. But if you get into a conversation with some of these folks, some of these guys on the team, about, what are you thinking and what are you feeling? And then you can be like, okay, well, there was one point in my career, this match, I felt like this, and this is what I did, and it worked. I think that can be quite beneficial. But if you don't kind of have that sort of lead up to it and make it about the player more in that situation, if I'm the one that's not playing, I think it could be a little detrimental. But that's how I feel like I take advice the best, is if someone says, okay, what do how do you feel in this moment? What are you thinking? What are you feeling like? What are you playing like? And then they say, okay, well, this happened to me one time, and this is how I dealt with it, and it worked out pretty well, or it didn't work out pretty well.
Yeah.
That rings true a bit more, because they're actually taking an interest on you. They're not just sort of shoving their own experience on you without sort of that lead up, if you will.
And with the team aspect of things, is there just a completely, not completely, but is there just a different sense of competition and drive and sort of like that killer instinct that is just not necessarily the same as with, pure singles competition?
Yeah, I think for sure, especially in these situations like with Davis Cup or the Olympics, and they always happen so rarely. Like
Yeah.
we play individual tournaments, even in doubles, but it's my partner and I. It's just for us, right? It's just
Right.
for us or our group of our team, if you will. But they happen, every week. We play 20 tournaments a year or whatever. These competitions happen. Olympics is once every 4 years, and Davis Cup is once a year. It's one competition a year that goes on. So it's also some of that it happens so infrequently that when you are in that arena, it means that much more, because it doesn't happen all the time.
Yeah. By the way, have you ever had the elements or the ingredients from your own experiences that perhaps make you more poised to be a coach or a leader of some of these kinds of events, or for that matter, take on coaching for other players on your own?
I mean, I think so. It's not something I've really tried so much. So I mean, there's been a few players that I've maybe you can say mentored in a way, but certainly not coached. It's
Yeah.
more just about sharing experiences and sharing, because if they're going through some of the same things that I had as a junior player, I can talk to them about that. But yeah, I think this is all what does help in the future make a coach that's quite valuable, is these experiences. You feel like you've been through different situations and you've seen different things and you've seen it materialize, and you can maybe impart some of that help on someone else. But ultimately, I think coaching is an art on its own. I feel like that takes work and practice. So just because I've been through it doesn't mean I'm going to be able to relate it to everybody. That's for sure.
For you, having won it at literally the highest level of the sport now, and then seeing other players who have had that success, is there actually a difference in how you observe the game, how you actually like critically analyze yourself when you watch yourself play on tape, or for that matter when you're watching other top players play? You just have to have a slightly different kind of analysis of it to maintain that success.
Yeah, I do. And I think the biggest thing I will say is I've realized how important the sort of intangible things are in tennis. And I'm sure in every sport too, because I try to pick at it in other sports too. It's not the stroke production or the actual playing of the point, but it's like, how do you behave? How do you act on the court? How do you sort of put yourself in a position to play your best? Or what's your energy like? What's your enthusiasm like? Sort of like, what's your vibe that you're showing off to the other player? And I think that that's not just sport. I think that's probably all areas of life. Like what kind of demeanor do you exude a lot of times has an effect on not only you but your competition, if it was such a situation. So I feel like those are the kinds of things that I see more now, and I realize the importance of, and I enjoy seeing that in other people, other players, other sports. And I think that's a big factor in a lot of times who wins and loses at the highest level, consistently at least.
Well, in many ways, just like child rearing, it comes down to temperament, it looks like.
Yeah, for sure.
Let me ask you, one last thought, and that is, there's certainly a lot of tennis to still play, and your career has been so successful so far. But how would you, at the end of the day, perhaps describe what you're most proud of when it comes to your off-court legacy?
Ooh, good question. I didn't think you were going to go in there with that. I guess, like I said before, it's sort of like what we first touched on. There's not many like me in the sense of a first generation Indian or American athlete of Indian heritage, I should say. And so the fact that if I could have been something of a trailblazer, as someone who other players or other people from sports or other athletes looked up and say, oh, there's that tennis player who came from a similar background that did pretty well, and that means that I have a shot at this, or a source of inspiration for anyone like that. I think that would be the thing that I'm the most proud of, is I was able to sort of hopefully forge ahead a new path for people that could take sports more seriously. Because look, even if you don't become a professional at it, sports is something I think that can teach you so much and give you so many lessons and so many great memories and relationships for the rest of your life. And I think if there's other Indian American kids that take it up because I played at a decent level, I think that's great. I think that's probably the thing that I'm the most proud of, is that if that happens, I would think that was pretty awesome.
Well, it's a lot of awesomeness for all of us to be inspired by, and to certainly revel in your success, with lots and lots of more success to hopefully come. Rajeev, thank you so much for joining us, and what a treat. I hope we'll be able to visit with you again.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here. I know you guys have had some great guests on your show, so it's certainly a pleasure to be part of that.
Thanks again, Rajeev. And thanks, Ed, for making my 5K run happen. Slow and steady. And staying on theme, congrats to longtime Dodger Dusty Baker. Remember, civic engagement doesn't end with your vote, so stay active and informed. Till next time, I'm Abhay.